Hello and welcome back to Chaos in the Paddock. It's been a while, but I am back as your host. It's me, Chiara, along with mini Chiara. If you guys can't see this right now because the clips aren't online yet, I have a little baby doll of myself right next to me. I also have a special guest today from Pit Debrief. I have Jonah. Say hi, Jonah.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Are you though?
Yeah, I've never been happier to be on another F1 podcast. It feels very nice to be behind the microphone for the first time, probably in about a year and a half. So it's very nice.
To be fair, I asked because it is very early in the morning for you because there is a time difference with a lot of us chaos guests. You're not the only person from that time zone that I've had on.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there was one time where I had to record at like 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and then yeah, and then when I lived in your time zone, I had to do late at night. So I'm kind of used to it at this point.
Okay, that's fair. And like for those who don't know, or I did mention that Jonah and I work or write together at Pit Debrief. So, Jonah, why don't you enlighten our audience on who you are, what your favorite team is, favorite driver, how you started watching F1? Go for
No
it.
problem. Okay, so my name's Jonah. I live in Montreal, Quebec, home of the best race in the world, the Canadian Grand Prix, and I'm currently coming to you from the home of Logan Sargent, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm on vacation. I started watching F1. It was really a family thing, actually. Every weekend, we would be up in the Laurentians, about 100 kilometers away from Montreal. And my grandfather, my father, and I would wake up every single Saturday and every single Sunday to watch F1. It was really something that went down through the generations. So now I guess I'm generation 3 of watching F1 in my family. So I've been watching since I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. I very rarely skip a race unless something is probably since around that point. Since I am from Canada, my favorite driver is Lance Stroll.
Oh
Uh,
boy.
I know, controversial take, but hear me out, okay? At some point, you got to defend the Canadians in sports where Canadians are not as present, okay? Since Jacques Villeneuve, there have not been many great Canadians. Actually, there haven't been many good Canadians. But you know what? Since Lance is from Montreal, I have friends who know him personally, but unfortunately I do not. I think that there is actually some upside to Lance. I think every single year, I think that statement kind of just gets less and less, accurate. But there is still some upside. I believe in the process, and I think that I don't know. I think it's just important to support the Canadians elsewhere. He's also from Montreal, so and he's not like Latifi, where he was born in Montreal and he considers his Toronto his home city, like a loser. But he actually will to continue to defend Montreal, even though he's halfway across the world. So yeah, that's why I like Lance Stroll. My favorite team is Aston Martin for roughly the same reason. It's been since, even before that though, since probably they were Force India, I started really liking that team. Was there a real reason? Not really. I think it's just the car looked nice when I was a kid. But when the Stroll family actually invested into it and Lance ended up on that team, I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe there is a valid reason for me liking this team now. So there we are. And yeah, that's my life. I've written for Pit Debrief for probably a year and a half now. It's definitely been pretty long. And yeah, I think that even in our Pit Debrief group chat, I am the chaos person since I am the only one talking about Lance. That's who I am.
To be fair, it's really funny to find a Lance supporter. I have to say, back in the day when he was still in Force India, I did prefer him there. I was thoroughly impressed during that time. This season was a little bit critical, and obviously last season was like, I have to be honest, it was a downhill from there. But what surprised me though, funny enough, guys, Jonah does admit Lance's shortcomings sometimes, so he's not as delulu as we think.
That's true. I think there was one defining moment for me this season where I decided to point it out very, very obviously. And that was, I don't know if you remember this, but on the formation lap of the Brazilian Grand Prix,
Oh my
um
God, I was there. I was like, what the hell was
on the
this?
starting lap of the Brazilian Grand Prix, Lance spun out, hit the wall, reversed, beached into the gravel, held up the start by like 20 something minutes. No biggie. But I think that he was just jealous because he didn't get enough screen time. So because of that, he decided to spin out, and now all the cameras were on him for like a good 20, 30 minutes, even the replays, right?
Oh my God.
Because he doesn't get enough race camera time. So when it comes to always making sure that people remember who he is, he always makes his mark.
Whatever mark it is a mark. I don't know if I'm very impressed by these marks. I certainly know the rest of the Pit Debrief team are not impressed by these marks. But hey, we have to accept what we get.
Well, look, it's either that or you look at Nicholas Latifi's mark that he made,
Oh
which
my God.
was,
Painful.
yeah, let's call it that.
It was a very painful moment. But speaking of painful, I'm going to ask you one thing, and you have to be on the spot here.
Okay.
Give me one word to describe the 2021 F1 season.
My God.
Because Latifi.
You know what? I think to describe the 2024 season,
24.
2021 season.
Yeah.
Oh, chaos. I know that it's in the title and that I'm gonna do all the plugs, but I think that it truly was chaos. Everyone thought like, oh, Max was gonna win at the beginning, and then Lewis made a comeback, and then the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix happened. I think actually that season comes close to the madness that we saw this season, even though I feel like this season was slightly more predictable than we thought it was going to be, because yes, Lando Norris made a fantastic comeback and came really close enough, but I think we all had this recency bias that Max didn't do enough in the beginning of the season to be able to actually claim his place regardless of his mediocre results in the mid to late season. But he was pretty dominant essentially from February until, I don't know, May, June, even more than that.
Yeah.
So I think it was more just giving Max a scare more than it was a genuine title fight. But I think I may be one of the, I guess, diverging opinions on that topic.
I do agree though, because if 2021 was chaos, I would say, like, for example, if I had to choose a word to describe 2024, I would honestly still use the word tame.
I agree with that, because I think that, look, there are many positives that we could gain from 2024. However, a lot of those positives came after the summer break.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to watch. Well, the entire season for sure, but essentially after the summer break, if it was a new season, then Lando would have run away with it. I think that there is still, I think that it's more of a foreshadowing to what next year could be, rather than this year being a true fight for the title.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think let's go with like highlights of the season. I think the first highlight, I have to say, that kind of marked the shift of the dominance this season was when Carlos won Australia. And I'm not saying this because I am a Carlos Sainz fan, which I am. I just think it was the first time where you were like, okay, someone else could have a chance at this, because it was very early on in the season, unlike last time in Singapore where
Right.
Carlos won. And when is Singapore? That's like way after the start.
They switched the calendar around this year too, right? Like, was Singapore
yes.
not much earlier this year, or am I going crazy?
I feel like Singapore was much earlier this year. I think what messed me up the most is we usually have the triple header of Monaco, Barcelona, and then Canada. but putting Canada in between Monaco and Barcelona kind of
Yeah, and it
messed
gets
me up.
it gets even weirder because in 2022 it was Monaco, then Canada, then Azerbaijan.
My God, right.
Yeah, so look, when F1 decided that they're going to move the Canadian Grand Prix up to late May instead of like mid-June, I understand the environmental impacts of it, but also it could be like 5 to 10 degrees Celsius in Montreal at that point, as much as it could be 25 degrees Celsius. So it's kind of just F1 is really gambling on global warming and hoping that it's actually nice
You're
in
making me
Montreal during the
not want
Canadian
to
Grand Prix.
consider Canada as a race
It
if you
means,
say
well,
it that way.
because next year it's still in mid-June, so there's no need to worry about it.
Unless it's rainy, I guess.
Yeah, I've been really unlucky with rain.
For
I probably should
those,
mention
yes,
I should
do
mention
that.
that, well, I actually have my tickets in the Lance Stroll grandstand in Montreal.
Oh my God.
Um, I thought you knew this, but yeah, I have my
But
tickets in the
I
Lance
did
Stroll
not,
grandstand.
I didn't know there was a Lance Stroll grandstand.
Yeah, it's on the exit of the hairpin. So it's actually a beautiful place to sit because you get to see the cars slow down, and when there's passing, there's not much, at least since I've gotten tickets, but when you get to see some passes, it's around the hairpin. But during the Canadian Grand Prix, I probably am very annoying, but I spam the Pit Debrief group chat with all the weather updates and how I'm doing. And it's really funny because literally in the span of 20 minutes, it could be hail and rain and whatever, and then the next 20 minutes it could be sun, not a single cloud in the sky. And that's Montreal for you. If you told me to bet on the weather for the next Canadian Grand Prix, I would say absolutely raining. I don't even know what the next weeks before that are going to be like. It could be 25 degrees on the Thursday before, but the next day it'll be 15 degrees and raining.
No, honestly, I think this season also showed that rain was still a really big equalizer as well. Like Brazil, that was the first time in my whole entire life that I experienced such a delay to the point that I had to wake up very, very early to even like get there. And
Yeah, I mean, rain was a factor in enough races this year that I thought that it would have actually shaken more things up than it actually did. I mean, look, I am super happy for Alpine, who managed a double podium in the rain. Do I think that it masks all their problems? Yes.
no,
Uh, I think that the team is gonna sit back and say, "Oh, well, we finished sixth place in the constructors. I guess we could kick back and see what's going on, and maybe develop the car, but not with that much urgency." I hope to God that they wake up and see that that was a fluke. But do I think it's gonna happen? No, I still think that Alpine are gonna tank next year.
I refuse to believe that it was a fluke because I like to think I was the good luck charm, especially after missing Mexico. So I was like,
Right.
okay, something interesting better happen this race because I did not come all this way to like not see something, and I did. And
Yeah,
granted,
I mean,
fruit stands were great. Like we had fruit stands. I could get like fresh smoothies every day, and that was fun. But
I
the
I wish it
race
was that easy in Canada
to get
to get anything, honestly, but whatever. But yeah, I think that if we go back to even like you mentioned Australia, where Sainz picked up the win, and it was what, the third race at that point.
Mhm.
When you get to what I mean, when Sainz won, I actually thought that there might have been I thought there might have been some sort of challenge, actually. I didn't think that it was going to come from Ferrari. I didn't even think it was going to come from McLaren. I just thought that there was going to be, it was at least going to be interesting in the first half of the season, and how wrong we were. But it also shows that this year, despite it looking on paper like a relatively dominant season for Max Verstappen, not obviously comparatively to last year, still a like clinching with a decent margin. A lot of people got their time in the spotlight this year, which is the exact opposite of what happened last year,
last year.
where as you mentioned, the only non-Red Bull win was Sainz winning in Singapore.
And
So
even that was already scary, and Max had to like really mess up not to be
yeah,
able to get to the front.
exactly.
And even
So
then, like he was phased, but deep down he was like, I still have this in the bag.
yeah, exactly. So it how many there were so many drivers that won more than one race this year. We had
Lando,
Max, Charles, Carlos, Lando,
Oscar,
Oscar, George, Lewis.
right, Silverstone. Sure.
Um and I actually want to touch on Mercedes and how they're feeling right now because yes, Lewis Hamilton is going to be wearing red next year. But I think that this departure season for Lewis in Mercedes could not, like, I think that picking up a few wins, having not won in something like 3 years, was exactly the motivation that he needed to bring to Maranello next year. I think I'm just going to dive into a little bit of a theory that I have, and it's that
Oh boy, I am scared because Lewis joining Ferrari to me is still
no,
vulnerable
I
territory.
I honestly I don't think that anything bad is going to happen. I actually think that one of the Ferrari drivers is going to be World Drivers Champion next year. I don't think it's going to be McLaren. Um,
Or
I
Max.
just I don't think it's going to be McLaren or Max because like I said earlier, I think that the back half of this season is more of a foreshadowing of what could happen next year. And even though in the back half of the year there weren't as many Ferrari wins as there were McLaren wins, for example, I think that Ferrari hopefully have experience with what it's like to be in a true title fight. Whereas I still think that the team at McLaren is too inexperienced to be able to have a full season of fighting for the title.
Mhm.
And I'm not just saying the drivers, I'm saying the team around them. So, I mean, we could go back to the Binotto era and say that it's all a mess, but I have more faith in Ferrari as a team than I do with McLaren as a team.
I don't even have faith in Ferrari as a team, and I'm a Ferrari girl. Like, been always been a Ferrari girl. I always will be a Ferrari girl, and we're always stressed. I don't know if you've because one thing we should do is we should honestly watch a race online together and see how everyone reacts because I feel like that will be such a riot. But
Oh,
I'm
if
always
we get the
stressed.
entire staff, if we get the entire staff on to watch a race, it would be like half of the people groaning in their heads and like the other half like jumping up for joy kind of thing.
I feel like most of the people in Pit Debrief are McLaren fans.
Probably. I mean, look, we all know that I'm the only one that's gonna be close to supporting Aston Martin or Lance. So I'll just be like, yeah, did you see that move that he made to jump up to P15? That was unreal.
Well, I will give you one thing about Lance, though, and this was in Monaco. He was the only driver to actually overtake someone in Monaco in that car. So I will give him that. And like I said, in many other podcasts I've been in before, I never actually thought that Lance was a shitty driver. I think he's just losing motivation for some reason. That
Right,
maybe he needs to jump the gun with his dad buying him a team and be like, I want to go somewhere else. I need to like.
right.
I feel like, for example, Lance could fare well in a different series, like Formula E.
I actually didn't think about that, and now I don't want to.
And now you don't want to. Well, you might turn into a Formula E fan, but I always believe that certain drivers perform better in different racing series. Like,
Right. I mean, look at Nick DeVries.
well, best example, but I also think if Nick DeVries signed for a completely different team,
Yeah,
I think he would have done much better because the pressure of Red Bull, I think, is enormous. Let's talk about the
No,
driver
I am
switching.
so happy that you were just about to say, let's talk about Red Bull.
Let's let's
Because,
let's talk about Red Bull for 1 second because okay, cool two teams because you have Red Bull and then you have V Carb, as we like to
yeah,
say, or Racing Bulls, RB, whatever you call it. But I don't know. I feel like seeing whatever goes down at Red Bull is like watching an episode of Dynasty. I don't know if you know Dynasty.
I do not know Dynasty, but for me, it looks like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So,
That's another great option to use.
because here's the thing, okay? I think that the biggest loser in these driver swaps is Yuki Tsunoda. Because I think that Yuki Tsunoda now has Pierre Gasly syndrome, but he didn't even get the call up in the first place. So I think, look, I actually think that if you put Yuki in a good car, that he's going to do even better than he already did. And when you look at the beginning of the season, he was going against Daniel Ricciardo, a very respected race winner, you know, darling of the paddock, whatever, can do no wrong. He proved that that Ricciardo was in fact the problem at VCarb and that he was the one that needed to be swapped out. I think that if you give Yuki an opportunity, I'm not saying you give him a full seat, but like even a test or a something, you give him the Red Bull, I think that he could actually do some good work. But I think that with this move and Liam Lawson being promoted over Yuki, that he is essentially doomed to stay at RB for the rest of his career unless he swaps out and goes to another team. But realistically, who's going to take him in?
No one. Oh my gosh, you put me in a difficult spot now because I openly say that Yuki Tsunoda is not my favorite driver. In fact, every time I get assigned to write a Yuki Tsunoda article, I just like sigh and, have issues to get on with it, but still do it anyways. But I have to say, as a journalist, I can respect what he achieved this season and obviously last season. I think the main reason he didn't get the call up was because the development to get to where he is or where he is this season took way too long.
That's a very fair point.
Because
I
Red
didn't see it that
Bull
way.
likes it swift. If you're a Red Bull driver, you're pretty much cutthroat. They train you to be cutthroat. Just look at how Hajar is. He can what you don't watch F2. I obviously run the feeders at this point, and I always love the feeders. Hajar, absolutely ruthless man on the radio, on the track. You can see his skills, but the guy is so PR trained that he could have the worst day possible, swear at you on the radio, and sit there in the media center and, talk as if nothing happened. Like,
Right.
look at Carlos Sainz. Like, everyone likes to forget that he as well was a Red Bull Junior. And people are like, oh, he isn't a team player. And I do agree there were some moments where the man was like, F you, I'm going to go do this my way. But he also came into the season knowing he doesn't have a seat with Ferrari anymore. So he was pretty much driving for himself.
Yeah, 100%. I actually, this is going to sound really stupid, but I think I'm actually going to defend Carlos Sainz being a selfish driver this year because honestly, I think he deserved it to be tossed aside with a year's notice so that you could he even said if you're being replaced by a 7-time world champion that you're not really going to complain. But at the same time, he's losing his dream job, right? And he was given a year's notice to know that he was losing his dream job. So at least you have the ability to make your point and say, first to Ferrari that they made a bad decision, and to the rest of the paddock that, hey, I still got it. Like, I've won races. I will continue to win races. We're not really fighting for the championship, but imagine if we were. And I think that's what Carlos Sainz did this year, and that's what I actually admire about him, is that he was not just going to sit back and let this become Charles's team.
Anyways, I do have to agree with you because at the end of the day, as much as it is a team sport and you want to collect points together for the championship, to win the Constructors' Championship, it is also very much something so individual. And I think that I don't necessarily think that Ferrari is making the wrong choice, because when Ferrari comes and offers you a contract, it's also very difficult to say no, right? Everyone, as Vettel put it back in the day, everyone wants to be a Ferrari driver. Not everyone gets the opportunity. And I think it is cool for Lewis to enter his final leg of his career, because I think this is going to be like the final stops. I give him 2 more seasons,
Yeah.
and then I think he will be gone. And I still have hope that Ferrari will call up either Sainz again, or maybe even go, I don't know, I'm thinking Ollie Behrman.
Look, I haven't watched
Oh
enough feeder
no.
series. No, I haven't watched enough feeder series to say anything about Ollie Behrman, because it's very easy when it's, at a decent time in Europe, but in Canada, it's like 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning, and I am definitely asleep at that point. So anyways, all is to say, I think that the entire Red Bull pool is full of people that are fighting for like
Their
two and a
life.
half seats.
No,
Not
they're fighting.
even.
It's survival of the fittest. Like who
Yeah.
did we have? So Max came in and replaced Daniel. He didn't just
Yeah.
replace him. He even took
He,
his
he
wife
actually
and
even
child,
took his girlfriend. Exactly.
and child. Like this is like a whole thing. Then we had Pierre Gasly with Max.
Then there was Albon. And now there's Checo.
Albon was replaced by Gasly.
No, Gasly replaced Albon.
Gasly replaced Albon. See,
And then
even I was
Checo replaced
confused.
Albon.
And then Albon was without a seat for 1 season and drove DTM with Liam Lawson.
Yeah, that is exactly what
Which is
happened.
very, very, very insane to me, because the amount of drivers that actually have driven a DTM season, even Esteban Ocon did, okay? But the pool is huge, and now you have even more people coming in from the feeders. We have, for example, German driver Tim Tramnitz. We have Oliver Goethe from the feeders, and Pepe Marti, and a lot of youngsters are also being dropped. So you probably don't know this because you obviously don't keep up with it. But as soon as certain youngsters are not performing, they get dropped by Red Bull and they immediately have a replacement. And I feel like this whole thing can be compared to college scouts.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. I think that, look, I really hope that at least on the Formula One side that Liam Lawson does well. I think that he deserves to do well. I just think that bringing him into Red Bull after what, 8 races, 7 races, something, however long it's been, I think that it's too rushed. I mean, Checo, for example, while not part of the Red Bull Junior Academy, raced 100-something races before finally getting his shot at a good team. Mark Webber raced for I don't know how long before ending up in a Red Bull seat. Sebastian Vettel raced for BMW and Toro Rosso and then ended up in a Red Bull seat. Like, for them to put Liam Lawson in that seat this early, I'm just worried is going to be a repeat of Gasly and Albon. I
I'm
don't know.
nervous. I mean, it's gonna make for some great entertainment next season, that's for sure. But I don't want this to overshadow Liam Lawson's career, because one thing I'm very excited for, and I think this season proved it, was to see youngsters thrive. And by youngster, I mean like Ollie Behrman. Like he was one of my highlights of the season as well. I think he came in to drive Carlos Sainz's car on short notice, because obviously he was the only reserve driver they had there at that time. And he finished in P6. Like, I was watching that race, feeling for his father who was pacing in the Ferrari garage.
Yeah.
His dad was like
seriously.
breathing in and out. And, I would probably be equally as nervous. How much more did his mom feel watching that? Like, his dad was already there. Like, not knowing what to do. And Ollie was just like, doing his overtakes. And to even come back and drive the Haas when Kevin Magnussen had his
Yeah.
one race back, and to finish in the Haas with a point, it's crazy.
Yeah, it really is crazy, but I 100% agree with you. Look, I'm super happy that these youngsters are getting their chance. But at the same time, the reason why there aren't more youngsters getting their chance is because we have people who are stuck to seats for reasons unknown. All right? Like, here's my thing, okay? Daniel Ricciardo showing up and taking an RB seat does not look good on the Red Bull development team. I think that imagine what you could have done with Daniel Ricciardo's seat for how long was he on RB for? Like a year and a half or something like that? Or
He
even
came
less
in
than that?
last season.
Like
When did
last season,
when
halfway?
did Nick DeVries hold on? When did Nick DeVries get the boot? Was it after Monaco? It was after Monaco, wasn't it? He couldn't even race
I
the
don't know.
Dutch GP. I don't even remember.
But the the whole situation is that we have Daniel Ricciardo who is tied to that seat for reasons I have no idea. We have Fernando Alonso who's like 40 something years old and is still driving the Aston Martin. Okay? Like, yes, he did a semi decent job this year, but at some point you got to realize that people are clinging on. Like, I understand that people are going to cling on to this job as much as they can, but at the same time there are other people that are waiting, notably in the Aston Martin system, Felipe Drugovich. But it's okay. Anyways, on the Sauber side, we have VB, who admitted that moving to Sauber was a mistake, who stayed there for 2 years after going to Mercedes. Imagine if Theo Pouchard was in that seat. Then we have Haas, where like Kevin Magnussen and
Well,
Nico
he's gone
Hulkenberg.
now.
I know he's gone, but imagine what 1 year, cutting these drivers' terms down by 1 year even, could do for the betterment of the sport as a whole by getting new people in. Like, I hope that Gabriel Bortoleto does a good job, but he's
I'm
gonna,
praying. I'm already
yeah,
praying. I'm lighting the candle now.
I hope that Bortoleto does a good job. I hope that Behrman does a good job. I hope that Hadjar does a good job. I hope that Lawson does a good job. But the thing is that there are so many other drivers that could have had their spots in Formula One that are being held by people who are either past their prime or just don't realize that the writing's on the wall.
Now I have a bigger question for you. Would you replace Lance or Fernando with Drugovich?
I think you know him. It's gotta,
Be
I
the
don't know.
journalist. Be the
I know
journalist right now,
I know
Jonah.
the journalist, but if you look on paper, you would replace Lance. And I think that, I mean, especially in our Pit Debrief group, I've been pretty adamant on being like, why do I do this to myself every weekend? Honestly, I don't know what I'd do if Lance left Formula One, like who I'd follow next. But on paper, yeah, you'd have to replace Lance. But at the same time, Fernando Alonso's like 40 something years old. And he's committed to the team for what, 2 more years? Because I know that he's going into the 2026 project. And I think the 2026 is the end of his contract. But like, is it really worth it to the team to have Fernando Alonso in that seat for 2 more years? Is it
Well,
worth it?
could be.
Like, he's just gonna rip on the team as much as he can. He already ripped on the team this year. As long as he doesn't go GP2 engine again, I'm gonna be fine with it. But all I'm saying is it worth it for the future of the team to have a 40-something-year-old Fernando Alonso and Lance with 10 years in Formula One still being at the same place that he was in like 2019? Is it really worth it?
That was one major factor of the season. I think we kind of realized seeing all of these new people come in, like, in a way, thank you, Red Bull, for doing the replacements, and in a way, to Williams as well. Like,
Yeah.
Williams is a whole other story, but when Logan Sargent started off the season and it was meh, I think it was even worse than meh, but that's when you kind of saw that, listen, with all of the developments that come in Formula One, the car will not suit everyone's driving style. Who
Right.
was the prime example for that? It started with Danny Rick. It just was not suiting him. And okay, it could have been a different story if he was in that Red Bull, but whatever RB did to their car, it just wasn't working. Moving on to Logan Sargent, you can tell that the man was struggling, and the man was struggling since last season. James Vowles, I think he knows he made the mistake of keeping him on for too long. I think that was his dad instinct, but you put Colapinto in, and okay, the second half of Colapinto's stint in Formula One was not the best, but he was still better, even though he would crash, like, he was still better off than Logan Sargent ever was.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that replacement, that swap in of itself is an example of what's going on with Formula One right now, is that drivers are being held on for too long. And the only, say what you want about the tactics, but the only people that are actually doing something about it is Red Bull.
That is true. That is a very good point. I
And
mean,
look,
Ferrari could
I'm
have
gonna
easily
say,
signed a youngster as well. If they didn't
well,
want Science anymore, they could have gone for Behrman.
exactly. And I look, I will not deny Sergio Perez's impact on the sport. As you know, he raced for Racing Point, and that made me really happy in 2020. But imagine if he had gone swapped out, like, after, I don't know, even like what, Canada was race 7. So let's say, like, I don't know, Monaco or Spa or something like that. At least say you put Yuki in or you put Lawson in. Whoever you feel makes the most sense at that point. At least you have a comparison point to say, you know what? Whoever driver gets in that seat, I think that it's going to work out in the future. I think that they've done super well with what they have, whatever. Or you have a situation where it's, you know what? It doesn't work out. That's fine. We have 2 more seats left.
Guess that's the benefit with Red Bull
Like,
as well. They have their junior team and then they have their main team. I don't want to say senior team, but they have their main team, and they could really utilize whatever is going on, and they have such a big pool, not just drivers, athletes in general. So
yeah,
that's fun. That's a benefit.
yeah. And I think with that sort of test run, because let's be honest, Checo was never going to fight for the championship. And at that point, like halfway through the season, we knew that Red Bull wasn't really going to fight for the constructors either. So when you don't have much to lose, and that Red Bull ended up 3rd in the constructors championship, you got to take the risk. And I mean, as much as we don't like the tactics, Red Bull are the only ones that are doing it.
I mean, a lot of people say that 2024 was the gift that kept on giving. In a way, I agree with that. We got to see a lot of, we got to see a lot of good races. We got to see a lot of moves that we didn't expect. Like, for example, Yuki getting P3, like in qualifying P3. He didn't win
Yeah,
P3, but he qualified P3, and that was
exactly.
his highest ever qualifying. So you did see some improvement there. What's one of your highlights? Like, what was one moment that really stood out to you?
I think one of the highlights that really stuck out for me, I mentioned Alpine before, even though I love that race. I think another highlight for me was also Lewis Hamilton making his mark on Mercedes before leaving, which is another thing I mentioned earlier. But for me, I think my top highlight is actually seeing some is seeing the evolution of teams, not necessarily on track, but off the track. And some of those efforts to get better showed on the track. I'm going to talk, one thing that comes to mind immediately with that is McLaren. I mean, sometimes you gotta, like, this whole papaya rules nonsense, like, is it worth it? No, but they learned from it. Do I think that they learned enough from it to compete next year?
No.
Not really. But I still think that being able to see the strategy behind, we finally can compete for something for the first time in like 10 years, being able to see that evolution inside a team is really, really cool. And whether or not you agree with the results or the way that they've been handled, it's still cool to see. Did it mean that Lando won 3 times this year? Did he win 3 times this year, or did he win 4 times this year?
4.
He won 4 times this year. And Oscar won twice. Say what you want about the first one, but, you know, I think that because
stressful win.
Yeah, because McLaren didn't properly know how to manage their personality drivers, or at least their drivers' personalities, say what you want, 2 different meanings, they managed to kind of improve over the course of the year. I think that they still have work to do. But on the other side, you look at Ferrari, who just didn't. They just didn't manage their drivers, and they just said, you know what, have fun, go race. And it probably it allowed them to miss out on a few points, which could have been detrimental for their attempts to win the Constructors' Championship this year. If we go back to Carlos Sainz doing what he did, at the same time, you got to consider that the team enabled it by not doing anything.
Yeah,
so
definitely agree with that.
I think that those are the two main points for me of teams learning how to deal with being competitive again.
You know what? I didn't expect such a detailed explanation, because usually people would be like, "Oh yeah, my highlight was when Lando won in Miami. Like, that first win is insane." I think my highlight of the season, like, if I have to look back, because I always write notes, obviously, for the podcast or for whatever article we need to write.
Right.
But one thing that really stood out to me this season was, I have to say, how the drivers kind of rallied around each other during the swearing, like when the swearing ban came about. Like, that's one thing.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the FIA yet.
Exactly. But like, driving wise, was when Joe got honored for finally getting to drive, even though it was his last race, getting to drive in the Shanghai Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And when he got the point, when he was like in the point.
Yeah, you know what? That was a real feel-good moment.
I was crying
this year.
I was crying when Lando first won. I cried when Carlos won, but I had to pull myself together. And then I cried when Joe, got his moment of glory in Shanghai.
Because he deserved it. He's been in the paddock for what? This is his 3rd year, right? This year, or was it his? I think it might have been.
I think it might have been, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was his 3rd year in the paddock, and for the Grand Prix to be on the calendar twice and then get removed twice is brutal, especially if it's your home race. I lived that because the Canadian Grand Prix got canceled twice over due to COVID.
Right.
Yeah. So the 2020 race we expected was going to get canceled. It was just going to stay in Europe, whatever. But for 2021, it was on the calendar. And then they said, yeah, due to Quebec's COVID laws, we're gonna cancel it and we're gonna move it elsewhere. It got replaced with Istanbul again. Yeah, that's what happened. It got replaced with Istanbul the second time, not the first time when Lance got on pole, and that I'll never make people forget, but the second time, where it was Valtteri's last race. So in the end, I don't feel too bad about it. But the fact that it was on the calendar and then got removed is brutal. So imagine feeling that you are a driver who has been waiting for so long to go to the place where you started watching Formula One. You know, the little picture of Zhou Guan Yu with his little flag and everything. It's adorable, okay? Like, for that to finally happen was amazing. Regardless of the race result, he actually got to do it.
That was so emotional. I was there. I got a hot lap actually from Mercedes. It was
Oh, that's fun.
that that was fun. Like I got a text message telling me to go down, and I thought I was just there to interview someone. Like God knows, obviously Chinese speaking, I was at my prime benefit there. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, you're doing a hot lap." I'm like,
Fun.
goody, goody. I've never done one before. Not here. The
Wow.
first one I did was in Daytona. I like that was okay because it's not as tight. The second hot lap I did was Monaco with a rally driver driving it.
Oh, wow.
I needed a drink after that. And Shanghai was a little bit, it was fast, but it was definitely more tame. So
Right.
I was glad I got to experience all of that. It's sad to see Joe go. What do you think his plans are? Do you think he will get that Ferrari reserve seat?
Honestly, I have no clue. I don't know. What's really weird is that you can't, it's going to be very difficult to look at Joe's track record from this year and try to get some positives from it other than in Abu Dhabi.
That's true.
Because how could you really say that you've done well this year when you finish on average in like
That is very true.
regardless of the car that you have, it doesn't really look good regardless of what metrics you have.
I guess this is just a person or a driver that we're gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah. And let's not forget he brings in some decent backing as well. So that may help whoever picks him up. I'm not saying that's the reason why he got into Formula One.
No, I mean,
but
we have to be honest though as well. It's a huge factor.
It is a huge factor, but it's not as much as a factor as my dad owns the team. So, I think that there is room for him in the paddock. I just don't really know where. But I'm not the team principal of a Formula One team, so it's not up to me to make that decision.
I was just gonna say, speaking of sponsors, I'm just very glad that Checo decided to finally have a break and maybe eat a Kit Kat.
My God.
I had to say that. But we did mention something really, really important. And I think the biggest factor of this season was the freaking FIA.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start because this
All
is
right,
a very
I know where to
touchy
start.
subject. You do the swearing ban.
All right, the swearing ban. What's the point? I mean, okay. Here's my anecdote. Okay, I play ball hockey, and I'm definitely not as competitive as the people who are driving Formula One cars. But if you're in the heat of the moment and things go badly, you want to swear. It's just what it is.
I do it when I drive on the highway. I'm sure you
exactly.
do the same.
So for the FIA to say like, oh, we're gonna fine you because of things that you said in the moment, what's the logic behind that? At that point, and then there was the whole thing where Mohammed bin Sulayem said like, oh, we're not rappers here, like let's be careful with our language. Definitely did not look good on him, or it didn't look good in the US where rap music is very popular and where it stems from and where people would take that as an offense. And then the drivers were kind of just laughing at it, which was hilarious because I would laugh at it too. But I think that it's just so overblown. Like if it's on TV, then the people have censors for a reason. Like that's kind of the way that I'm taking it. Like,
but Toto also said he agrees with it because his son started swearing and he learned that from the drivers watching Formula One.
Right, but if you're on the world feed, the sensors there are sensors on the world feed.
Okay, yeah, just don't let him wear the radio then. That's true.
Yeah, right? I mean, Drive to Survive is uncensored. I don't watch Drive to Survive, but it's uncensored. Um,
You should.
I just don't watch TV. That's what
You
it is.
can play, yeah, but you can play the game Where's Chiara? I've ran into Netflix a couple times this season that I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up there, or the Brad Pitt movie.
That's funny. But yeah, I just think that the general public has a way to avoid swearing if that's what you're really concerned about. It's called watching the world feed. That's it. And then
The
yeah,
community service was like the cherry on top.
why? What's the point?
Obviously, they had to make an example out of the world champion, but the swearing ban to me was like a funny thing. And then when my issue with the FIA was like the lack of consistency.
Right.
I think that to me was a bigger thing than the swearing ban, because okay, fine, do that, cool, go ahead. But the lack of consistency when it comes to like the penalties, when it comes to the decisions.
That was the most frustrating thing for me, because I whenever my girlfriend watches races with me, I try to explain like, oh, like he got a penalty because of this and that, but now I can't anymore because the penalties are given so arbitrarily and with times that I don't truly understand. And I want the FIA rule book, and I'm just gonna send them like send little emails like Toto did during I don't know, whatever race in 2021, and because it's frustrating for the people who are driving, but it's also frustrating for the people who are trying to watch and understand what's going on, especially since the sport as a whole is growing, and you're going to have a lot of people who are trying to understand what this sport is. If you have an association that's just giving out penalties essentially because they feel like it, what's the point? What's the logic? There's none.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I met the current head right now, Rui Marquez, because when I was working in Macau, he was our like race director and everything.
Oh, that's fun.
And yeah, he's a nice person, but the fact that he had to take on every single thing from like F1 Academy all the way up to F1, including F2, which was already carnage in itself. I mean, you have to know that only half a point separated Hadjar and Bortoleto from the championship.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And coming from Macau, for example, where I had to write a report that included 7 red flags, 7, that Rui Marquez had to call a mandatory meeting with all of the drivers to talk to them about their behavior on track. Like I was very impressed by that, because I feel like that would not have happened if there was 7 red flags. Right. It would have been 7 red flags.
Yeah.
But the fact that this guy had the time to be like, okay, boys, what's going on? Like, are you all okay? Like 7 red flags is unacceptable. Like, fix that. Like, that's not okay. Yeah. And for him to go, like, that was the thing. Like, that was the talk of the Macau paddock, was him having to fly to Vegas ASAP after the race. And I was like, wait, what? That's when I found out that the person who was supposed to be in Vegas got sacked.
Got fired, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And even the F2 race director, who wasn't even able to start. Like, she was fired before she was able to start.
They gotta get it in gear. Like, I'm witnessing the same problem in MLS, and I know that that's a really weird comparison to make. But as the sport is getting popular, even more popular than it was before, the people who are running the show are kind of getting in its way. Whether it's rules, whether it's the ticket prices, whether it's the, I guess, over marketing in certain areas, US, at some point, the decisions need to be made on whether it's good for the sport as a whole. In MLS, the situation is that all MLS games are exclusive to Apple TV, a service that not only does no one have, but you have to pay 35 Canadian dollars a month to watch all the MLS games. So,
oh, wow.
So if you have a sport that's growing and you're just blocking the opportunity to watch the games, then what's the point? I mean, in the US, there's like 3 free games a week and some that are broadcast in regional networks. But like, if I didn't have the Apple MLS pass, I can only watch my home team like 3 times a year.
Where do you watch F1? Do you have access to F1 TV?
I have F1 TV. And actually, this year, my subscription went from like 40 Canadian dollars to 100 Canadian dollars.
You know what? In the US, it's like $20 a year.
Not for me, not in Canada.
In Germany, I don't have access to it. I have to use Sky, for example.
So we have TSN that broadcasts the F1 season, but there are commercials in the middle of the race where like the race goes in a little window, and then the commercials are mostly full screen. That was how I watched Max and Lewis collide in Italy in 2021. Is through a little screen.
You know what? That's one thing that I have to give props to Formula E for, is now like they knew that they had to raise the chances of people watching Formula E for it to even survive, because it is a startup sport, as we like to call it. And now they made sure that Formula E can be watched on free TV as well.
Yeah, and I think that's great for the sport. I'm not saying that F1 does it for free, but I'm saying
lower the prices.
Lower the prices. And also, my Grand Prix tickets have gone up by like $500 in the span of 3 years, and I'm not happy about it. So that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, but you're still gonna go in 2025.
I still bought it, right? But anyways, I think that with all this being said, 2025 looks like it's going to be a great season. Whoever ends up on top, I mean, I think that for teams being able to learn what winning feels like and what losing feels like this year is going to have an impact on the way that things shape next year.
I would have to say the same. I kind of sat down and looked at my 2024 predictions, and most of it actually came true. The only 2 things that were left out was Albon on a podium, and for some reason I kind of predicted Hulkenberg on a podium. Don't ask me why. I guess I was holding out. I was holding out for that. And if I look back now with things that happened, I feel like Albon could have had a shot, like maybe during a sprint race or something, but Williams...
We forget that it's still Williams.
I don't want to say that, because I think Williams needs time to warm up because of all the changes that happened, especially after the Logan Sargent era now. I think we're very lucky in the sense that we could be seeing something fresh next season with Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, because I think Albon is a strong driver. He's just not cutthroat enough. He's
Yeah, and they race him so hard.
So I think exactly. I mean, Colapinto could have given him a run for his money had they switched out Sargent and Colapinto much earlier in the season. But now that Sainz is coming in, I think there's going to be a new hope and new breath of fresh air that I'm very excited about 2025, because frankly,
for sure,
I cannot describe 2024 to you, like, other than it was tame. The only entertainment we had were the driver swaps of Red Bull. The only entertainment we had was Logan Sargent being replaced, Daniel Ricciardo being replaced, Esteban Ocon not having the last race was another thing. But I have to say, him deciding to do that, to be able to do the Haas testing in order to be in the best position he can be for the next season, was a very responsible choice. And I think I would have made the same one if I was in his position. Flavio, whatever that was, okay. But in a way, but it's also understandable to give Jack Doohan a taste of what's to come.
For sure. I think that Jack Doohan might actually be the most F1 ready of the rookies next year. That's my hot take.
Ollie and Jack. Let's do Ollie and Jack, because Ollie has done it.
That's fair. But yeah, we will see what happens next year. I am going to head out. It is very very nice here in Fort Lauderdale. It's very sunny, and I'm going to go into the sun.
I am very jealous. The next time I will be on a beach will be sometime in January. Thank you for coming on and
Of course.
discussing the most random season we've had in a long time.
Yeah, definitely.
And for everyone, we wish you all a happy new year.